This video is sponsored by SimpliSafe. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. Do you have hobbies? Not like side hustles or the things that you do with the people you love on the weekends. I mean like hobbies, things that you love that are just for you that often happen around the rest of life. Well, for me, one of those things is planted freshwater aquariums. I'm in the fortunate position where I get to do a lot of things that I love for my job, and most of those things end up on camera. But the aquariums, they're kind of just for me, and they're always waiting there when the rest of life settles down. That's one of the problems with hobbies. They're kind of low priority and they happen around everything else, which means the time that you put into your hobbies is usually pretty precious. So today I thought it would be worth trying to figure out if using a 3D printer would make your hobby time more efficient, but mostly more enjoyable. And to try to figure this out, we gotta first talk about the tanks. This is a 30 gallon. I've had this set up for several years. It's doing great. But this one is brand new, which is why it doesn't look very good. But there's one big problem, and it's right there. When it comes to planted aquariums, one of the most important things you can spend money on is the light, because plants need good light. I bought this tank as a kit with all the different parts in it, and it came with kind of a junky light. But the light's actually not the problem. Actually, this is the problem. This is called a hood. It's a thing that goes on top of the fish tank. It covers up the light and stops fish from jumping out. Not strictly necessary, but I like it because I have cats. Now the problem with this thing is that it's molded plastic, and on the inside it was molded to hold the junky light that came with the kit. But I don't want to use that light. I want to use my own. And the most frustrating thing is that it almost just worked, but not quite. It's got these little plastic flaps in there, and the light that I want to use just barely fits in between them, but unfortunately, it's not strong enough to keep it there. Now, I tried hot glue and epoxy trying to get this thing to just stick to the plastic, and I just couldn't get it to stay. So I think instead we should just rebuild the entire thing and make it hold this light, but also make it so that the light can come in and out in case I ever need to swap it. All right, I've got all the measurements to basically just recreate that in Fusion, minus the parts that hold the old light. And while I'm modeling that, I'm gonna try to figure out how to hold the new light. Now, while I'm modeling this, I also wanted to think out loud with you for just a minute. When I think about 3D printing in regards to using it for hobbies, I've started to break it down into kind of 3 sections. And this particular piece of work feels like a structural element. Not like physically structural, I mean structural to the hobby. This is a piece that makes the hobby possible. It's like if you were to 3D print, I don't know, a pickleball paddle because you like to play pickleball. Well, that would be making it possible for you to play the thing. And when you think about hobbies, there's a bunch of different parts of them, and one of them is being able to do it in the first place. So when I look at this thing, this is actually gonna enable me to have the tank with the light that I want to have. And maybe this doesn't even matter, but if you were looking for an excuse to get a 3D printer, by chance, maybe this will give you some ammo. So I got this thing modeled as is, but then while I was doing it, I did come up with what I think is a cool way to mount the light temporarily. Now, one of the problems with the light is that it can't slide in from the top or the sides because of its size. So I made a way to twist it. I started by modeling the light, and then I made these 4 little clips. And these clips go on the different corners. And the way I'm testing to see if this works is just by rotating the light. So I think if you drop the light in at an angle, it should be able to pivot and then clip itself into these clips. But we won't know until we print this thing, and it's gonna take 16 hours. While we're printing that, I wanna tell you about something else I've been working on in the background, and it actually has to do with that right there. When I'm working on a 3D printed project, there's always multiple test prints and multiple versions, and it's really hard to keep track of which one was which version when they're all sitting in front of you and they all look really similar. So I made a plugin for Fusion, and the only thing it does is takes the version number of your file and creates a parameter in Fusion that's synced with the version number of the file. And then you can use that parameter to do whatever you want to. And in my case, I'm actually embedding the text in the file. So when I get the print, I can look at it and I know exactly which version it was from. Anyway, if that sounds useful to you, I'll put a link to it down in the description. You can go check it out. It's super cheap, but I think it's really cool. Let's go check out this print. All right, moment of truth. We gotta see if this works. I did change the door. It comes off instead of hinges, which I like better, and the finish on this thing is really cool. Look at this. This was printed with this side down on the build plate, and it was a textured build plate, which means you get the lines going back and forth, but you also get this really cool texture on it. Anyway, I used a textured plate because I was printing in PETG, but if you were using a different material, you could use a different like smooth build plate, or they have some with patterns on them. There's all sorts of options. Let's see if the light fits. Okay, so theoretically, you should be able to take this in here, set it down at 45, and just twist it into place. I mean, that's awesome. That it actually is a really good fit. If you needed to, you could always put a dab of hot glue right there to stop it from turning, but like, it's actually a really, really good fit. I mean, that kind of worked ridiculously well. I don't know, I was expecting to have some sort of a problem, but I didn't. I guess let's just go put it on the tank. And this was version 6, by the way. Go like this. Snap it in place. Oh, that one doesn't fit as well as the other one. Let's put that. Ooh, that's bright. Now, this is pretty weird. I tested that on camera just a few minutes ago downstairs. And in between that time and bringing it up here and putting it in place, it's actually not as tight. I mean, it's not super loose, but maybe the plastic cooled and shrunk just a little bit. Either way, I don't want it to fall into the water, so I'm gonna put a dab of glue there just to stop it from being able to twist. This video is sponsored by SimpliSafe, and I've been using them to secure my home for like almost 10 years now. And I'm not the only one. They've been voted the best home security system for 5 years running. It's a great system at a great price. Now the way this works is you go to simplisafe.com/ILTMS or use the QR code on screen, and you go build a system for your house. Only the doorbells and cameras and sensors, like water sensors for aquariums, that you need for your home. And then it shows up at your house in a box. You can set the entire system up by yourself in about 30 minutes, and then you connect it all to the app. And from that app, you can control everything. And on top of that, you can get monitoring for about $1 a day, which is a really fantastic deal to have somebody else keeping an eye on your house, whether you're there or not. Speaking of, they also have something called ActiveGuard, which allows the SimpliSafe agents to keep an eye through your cameras on the outside of your house. So if somebody shows up that shouldn't be there, they can talk to them through the camera, and if they need to, they can even call the police. But they do have an AI technology built in there to recognize friends and family and people who are supposed to be there. Through the rest of the year, they've got a great deal going. If you use this QR code, you get 50% off your system, and you get a free month of monitoring. I can speak from experience, SimpliSafe is a great way to secure your home, the stuff in it, and most importantly, the people that you love. Be sure to go check them out, and huge thanks to SimpliSafe for sponsoring the video. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. Ooh, that's pretty nice. I gotta admit, that went way better than I was expecting, and I don't know exactly how it's gonna hold up, but I mean, the good news is I can always just print another one if I need to. Now, you may remember that this hood is actually a project from a video a couple of years ago, and it's beginning to show its age, so we might have to come back to this one. But the next problem we're gonna solve is this. Every hobby comes with stuff. You got supplies, you got tools, you got things you bought that you didn't actually need to buy. It's all gotta go somewhere. Obviously, you don't have to have a 3D printer to organize stuff. You can go to the store, buy some plastic bins that may or may not exactly fit your stuff and may or may not exactly fit your space, but if you 3D print it, it's gonna fit exactly. Creating custom organization, I think, is one of the places where 3D printers shine. I mean, it can be so useful for everybody, no matter what you're talking about. You can build really custom holders for weird shaped things, or you can just print bins that are the right size for where you need to use them, and you get to pick the colors. And even though I like to start from scratch a lot of times, you don't have to. There are some great open source solutions to help you organize all sorts of different stuff, and I want to show you a couple of them really quickly. One of them is called Gridfinity, and it was started by a guy named Zach Friedman, and basically it's an open source grid system like this that you print out, and then you can print other things that snap into the openings in that grid. You can print as many of these as you need at different sizes to fit whatever flat surface you're trying to organize. And because it's open source, there's a huge and growing library of things that you can print that will snap into this system. Basically, it's different size containers with the right fitting on the bottom to go in those openings. On the website, they've got a catalog with just tons of different mounts and drawers and containers and all sorts of stuff that fit into this system. But because this is open source, they're created by all sorts of people and they're put all over the internet, so there are tons and tons of resources that go into this system. I printed out just a couple of them to show you what I'm talking about. In my shop, I've got these really shallow drawers, and I printed out 2 of these giant grids to fill most of the space, but it's not exact. This one's a little holder for spools of wire. You can put a dowel rod across here and hang each spool and then feed them through these holes in the front. And then I printed out several of these different little trays with different size openings. The sections on the bottom just drop into these little sections in the grid, and everything stays in place. But I gotta be honest with you, it's not my thing. Now don't get me wrong, it's a great system and it works in a lot of different situations. Plus the library of things that you can print to fit into it is growing constantly. So it's a great system. It's just not for me. Personally, printing something like this just to be able to sit that there seems unnecessary, but whatever, that's just me. I think it's great for a lot of people and you should definitely go check it out. But I've got another thing I want to show you. Gridfinity is great for unique holders and small things, but what I need today is actually some just big bins to hold weird stuff that's all different shapes. And I found a free tool that helps you generate the bins that you need exactly to the right size and with exactly the features that you want. It's called Bento 3D. Basically, it just lets you put in the different dimensions that you want for a bin, and then you can segment the inside of it however you want. And it's all in real time, so you can just adjust it here on screen and the entire 3D model changes. And then after you've got your bin designed, you just go up here and hit download, and it creates an STL file that you can download for free and then print it out. So let's print some out. Now I didn't actually make specific bins for the things that I have in that cabinet yet. I just made some general bins that I can use wherever. Some of them will go up there and some of them will end up here in the shop. I made some big open ones with no separations on the inside. I made some with just a few separations, with more, and then a couple with a whole bunch of small areas for little tiny stuff. Anyway, let's go see if these are helpful. And while we do, I'm gonna tell you about making some custom solutions. Now things like Gridfinity and Bento are fantastic for getting quick organization. You can just make it, print it, use it right away. But custom solutions are also great, which is why I wanted to show you this. It's a very simple tray that I designed in Fusion, but the cool thing about it is that it's parametric, meaning that the entire thing is driven by numbers. So if I change the dimension from 12 inches to 6 inches, it will make another version of this exact same thing that's 6 inches square, and it fits right here in this little slot. If I change it again to 3 inches, I can make another one that fits into a quadrant of the 6-inch one. It's pretty fantastic and super easy to do, especially if you know Fusion. And if you'd like to learn how to use Fusion, our course, Fusion for Makers, has been completely updated for 2025 and it's on sale right now, link down in the description. Now let's talk about maintenance. Now we talked about the structural stuff, we talked about the organization stuff, but there's also maintenance in every single hobby. Either stuff you have to clean or maybe you have to take stuff from one place to another. And a lot of the things that make that possible are things that you can buy, but sometimes it's not worth it, like in the case of this thing. Now, if you've ever been to a pet store and tried to get a fish, the person working there will take one of these, hang it on the side, fill it up with water, and then they drop the fish in there and then they pour it in a bag. This was $15. Now granted, this is a cast piece of acrylic or some sort of plastic. It's nice and strong, it can hang on the side of the tank, but $15 for a piece of plastic when you have a 3D printer is kind of crazy, especially since what I use this for is just hanging it on the side of the tank and then dropping in little plant clippings when I'm cutting things down. So we're gonna make a different one of these, but make it dual purpose. And we're gonna make it dual purpose because there's also the issue of this stuff. Now, aquascaping is basically underwater gardening, so you end up with a bunch of gardening tools. These are all stainless steel, they're nice and heavy, but they get wet. And I don't know if you noticed or not, but this is walnut. So when I work on this tank, I just put down a little towel on this narrow strip of wood, but I still end up dripping water and messing up the finish. So let's make one of these that's dual purpose, something that's also tall enough to hold those tools and hang on the side of the tank. Now we could just try to recreate this exact same thing and 3D print it in a colored plastic. There's actually some problems with that because 3D printing happens in layers. Now the problem is if you try to print it like this, the hook is going to be really weak because it's only really connected to the same sections across the top in this direction. If you try to print it like this, it's even weaker because it's only connected across right here. You could try to print it like this, but then you have to fill the entire inside with support material. So we got to come up with a way to separate this hook from this container. I made a couple of different versions of this. This one has a lower scooped front, and this is for like plant clippings and stuff, so I can just drop them in here and then take this off and dump it out. And then the taller one is for all of the tools. But you'll notice that neither one of them have a hook on the back. They do have a hole.
Wow, what a hole.
And that's because I printed these. Basically, I just separated the hook from the container. And with the hook separate, you can actually change the orientation to make it way stronger and print it on its side. And that also makes it easier to print these with almost no support material. Plus, they just hook together perfectly. So now you can take that, drop it right on there, and then that hooks right on there. And of course, the other one works exactly the same, except that it's taller. Oh, didn't think about that. The opening on the backside of the container is actually wider than the clip. And so if you put all these on one side, there's enough room for it to actually twist and lean over. That's an easy enough fix. I just have to make this thing wider. But the point is that this can hold them and you can set it down on a table, which makes it great for working on things here, but also for storing all these away. I mean, it's pretty dead simple, right? But it's very useful, and because it's a fusion model, you can change the width and depth and color, whatever you want to make these exactly what you need. I thought this was gonna be the last thing I was gonna do today, but now that I'm seeing this empty space right here, I think we got one more thing. Now, obviously, aquariums are my hobby, and here are some examples of how a 3D printer has made my time more useful, more enjoyable, but it got me thinking. I would love to know down in the comments, what is your hobby, and how could a 3D printer make that time even better for you? Let me know. If you like this video, you'll also probably like this one. Thanks for hanging out with me. Catch you next time. Custom solutions for all your storage needs. For your knees. Now the problem is, if you try to print it like this, you're gonna have a willy. If you like this video one, dang it.